Pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)(I), the city council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending and potential litigation. This executive session is slated to last 60 minutes. No action is expected.
Councilmember Shrebnik, I see that you're online. Can you test your mic so we can hear you?
Yeah, can you hear?
Yeah, we've got you. Thanks.
Kenmore City Council is returning from executive session and adjourning our special meeting, calling the regular meeting to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Present.
Councilmember File,
Present.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
all present.
Would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there's any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next, we have a proclamation for Juneteenth. Excuse me. Whereas the first day of January in the year 1863, the Honorable President Abraham Lincoln issued a momentous decree known as the Emancipation Proclamation, a pivotal step in the long and arduous journey to abolish the inhumane institution of slavery in the United States. And whereas the culmination of this struggle, the cessation of slavery, gave birth to a day of profound significance known as Juneteenth. This day is acknowledged as the oldest recognized public commemoration of the cessation of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth is not only a commemoration of the liberation of African Americans from the bonds of slavery, but also serves as a grand celebration of the strides made towards improving education and increasing opportunity within the African American community. It honors the courage, resilience, and determination that led to their freedom and progress. And whereas on a broader scale, the celebration of Juneteenth serves as a poignant reminder for every citizen of the hallowed promises that form the bedrock of the American dream: freedom, equality, and the opportunity for all to pursue their ambitions without hindrance or prejudice. And whereas on the 13th day of May in the year 2021, Governor Jay Inslee gave assent to House Bill 1016, thereby officially declaring Juneteenth a statewide holiday and generously granting a paid day off to state workers starting in 2022, a recognition that deeply honors the importance of the day. And whereas in alignment with this declaration, the Kenmore City Council adopted resolution number 22-381, thereby affirming Juneteenth as an official city holiday, a testament to the city's commitment to remembering our history and promoting equality. And whereas, despite over 155 years of having passed since the formal conclusion of chattel slavery in the United States, the nation continues to grapple with the deeply ingrained and pervasive remnants of discriminatory systems and structural racism that still affects many aspects of our society. And whereas the city of Kenmore is steadfastly dedicated to creating a city where all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background, feel safe, respected, and loved in their place of residence, fostering a culture of inclusivity and unity. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2023, as a day to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth throughout the City of Kenmore. We urge all of our residents to unite with the City Council in this meaningful observance, to honor the past, celebrate the progress, and work together towards a future of true equality and justice for all. And I would like to invite members of the Inglemoor High School Black Student Union to accept this. And my understanding is they'd like to say a few words.
My name is Olivia Chambers. I am a senior at Inglemoor High School and the president of the Black Student Union. Today, we gather here to receive the Juneteenth Proclamation, a significant milestone in recognition and celebration of freedom. As we stand on this precipice of this momentous occasion, I'm reminded of the powerful words of Frederick Douglass. He once eloquently said, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I may mourn." In these few words, Douglass encapsulated a stark reality that existed for so many during a time of supposed celebration. The 4th of July, a day that symbolizes independence and freedom, holds a different meaning for those who were shackled by the chains of slavery. Douglass reminded us that while the nation revels in its triumphs and progress, there were those whose spirits remained burdened, whose voices were silenced, and whose dreams were deferred. Today we stand here united, ready to embrace a new chapter in our collective history. The Juneteenth Proclamation stands as a testament to the resilience, perseverance, and unwavering spirit of the African Americans who fought against the yoke of bondage and demanded their rightful place as free citizens. Together, let us pledge to embrace the spirit of Juneteenth by fostering unity, understanding, and respect for one another. Let us amplify the voices of those who have been marginalized and oppressed throughout history. Let us ensure that our city is a beacon of hope and equality for all its residents, regardless of the background or origin. Thank you all, and may the spirit of Juneteenth guide us on this transformative path.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aliana Taylor. I am a senior at Inglemoor High School, and I am the secretary of Inglemoor's BSU. I first off want to say thank you for inviting us. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm sure my fellow BSU members are too. To me, acknowledgement and apologizing are one of the most important emotional skills that we learn in our lives. As a kid, I was never really taught the importance of an apology, but over time I realized how monumental it can be to hear the words, "I'm sorry," and yes, that did happen. There are many things in US history that are constantly overlooked, stories of violence, brutality, and conflict that never really see the light of day. I want to thank you for acknowledging Juneteenth, a holiday that acknowledges me, my family, and the rest of the African American community in Kenmore. Recognizing Juneteenth acknowledges these untold stories, the story of slavery, how horrific it was, and that in US history, Black people were denied one of the key principles in America, freedom and independence. That was until Juneteenth, when Texan slaves had heard that they had been set free, that they were able to go and leave and do what they pleased. Kenmore is my hometown. I've lived here all my life, but as a person of color, sometimes I feel that I stand out here. There are some times where it's been made to feel that my family and I are unwelcome. But to acknowledge and celebrate Juneteenth is to say that my family and I are welcome, that we are wanted here, that we are loved, and that we are part of the city and part of this community. I'm confident that this proclamation, this acknowledgement, is a step in the right direction, that this can make up for the times that I've felt isolated in this community. I'm looking forward to the Juneteenth to come. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lily Agai. I'm currently a junior at Inglemoor High School and a member of Inglemoor's BSU. First, I want to say thank you for so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak here. Being a Black student, the minority at a majority white school can be intimidating, but the small and big changes really do impact our lives, such as the establishment as Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Although it is evident that Black people are still marginalized in society, this is still a victory and something that deserves celebrating. It's one step forward of many steps to come. Juneteenth is a time for reflection, remembrance, and acknowledgement. For me, it's a time to reflect on our history of racism and oppression, as well as celebrate the tremendous contributions of African Americans to this country. It's a time to remember all the Black heroes that had to deal with so much violence, but still paved the way for us. Lastly, it's a time to acknowledge the work that remains to be done addressing institutional racism and systematic inequality. This Juneteenth proclamation is a big step for Kenmore as a majority white populated city, and I'm very happy to be part of it. Being able to have support from the city to celebrate this important milestone really does mean a lot, and I hope this acknowledgement informs and opens the eyes of many. And make sure to come by next Wednesday for the Juneteenth celebration at Town Square. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Omar. I am a teacher at Inglemoor High School, and I'm also the club advisor at Inglemoor High School. I'd like to say thank you so much for the city of Kenmore for bringing us all together for this momentous occasion. Today, I stand before you to shed light on a historic occasion that has shaped the fabric of our nation and deserved our utmost attention and recognition. Juneteenth, also as Freedom Day or Emancipation Day, holds immense significance as a symbol of liberation and the ongoing struggle for equality in America. On June 19th, 1865, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed by President Abraham Lincoln, General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, with the news that slavery had officially ended. The announcement marked a profound moment in our nation's history as it brought the emancipation of enslaved African Americans to the farthest corners of the Confederacy. Juneteenth commemorates this momentous occasion and stands as a powerful testament to the relentless pursuit of freedom and justice. The importance of Juneteenth lies not only in its historical context, but also in the lessons it teaches. It serves as a reminder of the resilience, strength, and perseverance of those who have fought for freedom and endured the horrors of slavery. It is a day to honor the heroes who fought against oppression and dedicated their lives to the cause of freedom. Moreover, this proclamation and the recognition of Juneteenth is a celebration of the progress we have made as a nation, while also acknowledging the work that still lies ahead. It highlights the need for continued efforts to dismantle systematic racism, eradicate discrimination, and ensure equal opportunities for all. It urges us to confront the uncomfortable truths of our past and work collectively to create a more inclusive and just society. By observing Juneteenth, we recognize the contributions of African Americans to the development and prosperity of our nation. It is a day to acknowledge their cultural heritage, their achievements, and their immeasurable impacts on various fields, including art, literature, science, politics, and sports. Juneteenth serves as a powerful platform to amplify Black voices, elevate their stories, and foster a deeper understanding of their experiences. In recent years, there's been a growing recognition of Juneteenth as a national holiday, and this acknowledgement reflects the significance of this day in our shared history and the urgent need to address the wounds of the past. By declaring Juneteenth as a federal holiday, we send a message of unity, solidarity, and commitment to a more equitable future. However, merely designating a day as a holiday is not enough. We must also embrace the values that Juneteenth represents throughout the year. We must engage in conversations about race, educate ourselves about the struggles faced by marginalized communities, and actively participate in efforts to dismantle systemic barriers that hinder equality. As we gather to commemorate Juneteenth, let us remember that freedom is a continuous journey. It requires vigilance, empathy, and unwavering dedication. We must strive to create a society where the color of one's skin does not determine their opportunities, where justice prevails over prejudice, and where every individual can truly express and experience liberty and equality. On this Juneteenth, let us stand united in our commitment to creating a future where the shackles of discrimination are forever broken, and the promise of liberty and justice for all is fulfilled. Together, we can build a nation that not only cherishes its history, but also embraces the diversity and strength of its people. Thank you to the City of Kenmore, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite all of you to come up here. I'll present the proclamation to you, and we'll take a quick picture with the council. Thanks, you guys. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a presentation, Federal Lobbyist Strategies 360, introduced by City Manager Rob Carlindsey.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So last February, you all approved a funding package for Climate Action Plan and Housing and Human Services. And part of that package was to fund the bringing back of federal lobbyists. And so that was part of the funding package. And so we went and did a request for proposals, and we had a number of potential lobbyist firms respond to that request for proposals. Long story short, Strategies 360 competed well and came out on top. And so we selected them, and you approved their contract a few months ago. But I would like to introduce Crystal Ellerby. She's our main point of contact with Strategies 360. She's sitting in the middle there, and Tylynn Gordon, and also Matt Gall is also with us. So if it's okay with you, Your Honor, I'd like to turn it over to Crystal, and she can give a little introduction on her firm and what their marching orders, so to speak, are for on behalf of the City of Kenmore.
And city council members, my name is Crystal Ellerby. I am the Senior Vice President of Federal Relations at Strategies 360. We have 13 state offices, and also we're in DC. We're in Canada as well, and in Asia. We are the best in the West. We are based here in Seattle. Our founder is Ron Datzauer. I'm sure all of you know of him. And what we are is a public relations, government relations, digital marketing. We do grassroots for local educational agencies. We do state relations as well. We have an office in Olympia, but particularly for you in Washington, DC, Matt, Tylynn and I represent you on Capitol Hill with the Washington State Congressional Delegation. And we also represent your interests with the Biden-Harris administration and federal agencies, particularly looking at funding opportunities for your different projects. Like your climate funding plan. We've already sent you some information from EPA with regard to the greenhouse gas fund that has been implemented through the Inflation Reduction Act. But again, I mean, we are based here in Seattle, and we have 13 state offices, and we're here to provide you with advice and counsel on anything involving the federal government. And this is just, myself, Tylynn Gordon, and Matt, and our roles, our different roles for you for the city of Kenmore, Washington. And this is of keen interest for all of you. This is the city of Kenmore's federal legislative priorities. As you may be aware, you did make the list for Representative Suzanne Delbenny's community project funding request for fiscal year 2024. Congress is in the process of continuing to work on fiscal year 2024 appropriation requests. I'm sure you're all aware of the debt ceiling and what we've been going through back on Capitol Hill in Washington, DC. That has been taken care of for the next 2 fiscal years, but we are working on regular order, which means trying to get all 12 appropriation bills done before September 30th. That's the end of the federal fiscal year, and October 1st is the beginning of the new fiscal year. And so for your legislative priorities on the federal level, it's the Culvert project for $1.3 million, the Climate Action Plan funding, Housing and Human Services funding, the multimodal transportation funding, and then the limiting of flight restrictions during presidential visits. Tomorrow, we will be with your senior leadership team, and we will be going around the city looking at your various projects. But again, we really appreciate you allowing us to come here this evening and introduce ourselves to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Well, they just came out of the gate running really fast, and they've been doing a great job for us. They've already plugged us into some key grant opportunities, as Crystal just mentioned, including some EV charging grants. And so we're really excited to work with them and give them a little tour of the city while they're visiting from DC. And one of our first stops tomorrow will be Kenmore Air to talk to them about those temporary flight restrictions that are kind of a thorn in everybody's side here in this part of the lake. So we look forward to having a great working relationship with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
It's right here. All right, so we have three things. This is kind of a newish agenda item that we have. But it's hard for me to do just one fun thing every council meeting because there's so many fun things going on in this town. And so is this, okay, all right. We kind of choreographed this a little bit. So sometimes, you know, in nature, we see things that look like people or objects. So for example, you might go to the bakery and you see a pastry and you might see like a historical figure in the pastry or something. We've seen that on the news, right? Or like you might look at a cloud and you go, well, that's an elephant. Well, something similar happened in Kenmore a week or two ago. Tracy Banashinsky was leading another volunteer effort at one of our city's parks to do habitat restoration, and there were volunteers working. It was sunny and it was warm, and some of the volunteers were working up a sweat. And lo and behold, guess what showed up on this person's T-shirt? Look at that. And he did not do anything to make that happen. His love for the city came shining through that day. And his name is Kurt, by the way, and he gave us permission to share his heart shirt photo with us. So, all right, so the next one is, what is the next one? Oh, yes. Okay, so a few weeks ago, Jarrett Smith, our engineering inspector, he summited Mount Baker and brought the Kenmore flag up there. Well, this time, just last weekend, or a few days ago anyway, he brought the Kenmore flag up to the top of Mount Shasta. And so here he is waving the flag. And when you bring a flag like that up to the top of a mountain, people ask about it. And so he got to tell the Kenmore story on the summit of Mount Shasta. And they even recognized him in the parking lot when they got down to the bottom. Oh, you're the guy with that flag. So, all right. And then last but not least, the fire department had a pancake breakfast week before last Saturday. And this is Officer Boyer doing his community outreach and making animal balloons for youth. And I just thought that this was the most darling thing that day. So pretty wonderful, huh?
Pretty great. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary goal of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address their comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We'd like to take the first batch of residents who wish to speak in this order. Milton Curtis, followed by Lisa Wood, Richard Konchesky, Elizabeth Mooney, and Patrick O'Brien.
Hello, I'm Milton Curtis, living at 6407 Northeast 202nd Street in Kenmore. I'm compelled by the principles of democracy to share my opinions. Instead of grumbling and complaining about the decisions that governments make, I must at least state my concerns. I object to the recent council decision to paint the pride flag on the front steps of City Hall for the following 4 reasons. You know I like to be concise. Number 1, I believe the role of city government is to focus on governing the city for the citizens of Kenmore. They must manage police, fire, and utilities, even though it is through contracting agencies. They must manage growth, zoning, safety, transportation, parks, federal and state requirements, public works, road repair, budgeting, financing, and other essential services. Number two, I do not believe that this role of city government is to make political controversial statements using one of our main public buildings. The pride flag is clearly a political statement. The city council is supposed to represent all Kenmore citizens. I doubt this issue was requested by a majority of our citizens. Number three, I believe tax money taken from the citizens should be spent for priorities in a fiscally responsible manner. I do not think this is a priority. If Kenmore has enough money for this type of frivolous expenses, then the citizens of Kenmore should not be asked to pay more taxes. Number four, if a flag mural is to be added to the city hall steps, I would prefer red, white, and blue to represent patriotism, which I think most of our citizens would support. My request is for the city council to put a hold on the painting and to schedule a public hearing to get a better idea of what the citizens of Kenmore actually want. There is no state or federal deadline to do this. We have time to hear from our citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wood. I live in Kenmore. Thank you for having me today, Mayor and City Council. I live across from the new park called TAADs. If I got that halfway correct. Applause? No? Okay, so I live across the river from there and I have 10 acres of land that's zone native growth. And many of you aren't aware of that. And it's a huge amount of land that pairing with the park provides a habitat for so many animals and species, as well as filters out all the groundwater that comes down from the hill, from all the houses run off from that. I've been working to restore this land for over 10 years, and I am looking to see if I can partner with the city in some way to help out with getting a grant from the King County Conservation District. And we have a big priority right now to get watering to our new plants out there. So wanted to introduce myself, and don't be surprised if I contact you, as well as I invite you all to come out for a walk. We have a 1/4 mile trail around the property, and it's shocking to see how beautiful it is over there and what we can do in a small amount of time to restore our land to something really spectacular. Thank you for your time.
Richard Konchesky.
Hello, my name is Richard Konetska and I live in Bothell. And I'm here to talk about Esperanto. How many of you know what Esperanto is? Oh, okay. It's a language that was invented in 1885 by a Polish ophthalmologist named Zamenhof. And his idea, he saw so much conflict around language, he thought if he could create a universal language, one that could be shared by all, then it would help further communication, world peace, harmony, etc. And it really had taken off, but it's had ebbs and flows over the century, the last 100 and some years. And what I'm proposing is that the city of Kenmore implement Esperanto as a second language to be taught in their schools, starting with kindergarten and all the way on up until they're fluent in Esperanto. And I'm prepared to find the funding for this because I know teaching is the North Shore School District's responsibility, but I think if we provide them the funding to do it, they will be somewhat receptive to it, particularly with your backing. And I could see this as being a way of implementing Esperanto, not only across the United States, but across the world, because we are seen as kind of an arrogant country with regards to thinking of English as a universal language. English was the second most popular language in the 1990s, At the end of this decade, we'll be fifth. So we're not growing as a language. And it's a very difficult language to learn. And the beauty of us already, our population being fluent in it is that we will have mastery of that language and the neutral Esperanto, and we can literally talk to the world. And I don't think there's any replacement for one-on-one communication. I know the computer tools are helping immensely. I see I'm being recorded up there, and as I speak, I can't watch. And but there isn't anything like one-on-one communication. I've got a handout that I've made available to the council. There's about 2 paragraphs on this thing that you'll receive tomorrow. And it's got some nice eloquent summary. And there's this excellent book called Esperanto, Learning and Using the International Language. And I'm going to leave this with you, Corinna. And it's checked out from the library. And if you don't return it, Mr. Bookman will come for you. But it's got about 3 or 4 weeks left on it. And the first 65 pages are just an excellent, rich history of Esperanto and how really widespread it is and how much credibility it already has across the world.
Thank you
And the
so
beauty-
much. I'm sorry to cut you off. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can leave those materials with the clerk.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, Elizabeth Mooney, resident of Kenmore and president of a nonprofit, PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore. I'm here because sometimes I get concerns from citizens, and last week I got some notices that were coming out about our shoreline. And we care about salmon and the shoreline and educating the public. And we're planning a Stream Fest September 16th with other nonprofits, Snow King Watershed Council, et cetera, other citizens here that I respect a lot. And we're hoping to have it at Log Boom Park again. And that's where What's Up is. And we are looking forward to working with Steve and encouraging people to get out on the SUPs, et cetera. So last week, I learned that there was a notice about dredging in the berthing area that is where the Cal Portland folks bring in gravel, et cetera. And that also, maybe not everybody knows everything about the asphalt emissions. And thank you, city, for asking the governor to turn off the emissions, because it turned out that they exceeded emission standards. But the point that I want our citizens to know is that Cal Portland Glacier Northwest, who put out this request for dredging, is the landlord for Cadman, which is the asphalt company. So some of our citizens, like Dr. Richard Honor, he takes a precautionary approach about things, and I respect him. He has spoken at our science lectures about sewage sludge. Just a great citizen that we have in our community. Another citizen is Dr. Joan Hardy. She wrote the tome about PCBs that are in the fish. I don't think we have signages anymore down at Log Boom Park about what fish should be eaten or not. And the northern pike minnow are not, as far as I know, they're still not something that you want to consume because you'll bioaccumulate toxins. So we do know that there is no known source of the dioxins and other dangerous chemicals in our lake at the northern end. And so I'm just hoping that we take a prudent approach, and I'm looking forward to helping find out what we're doing, because there's a July 1st deadline for people to make comments about the dredging proposal from the company. And, you know, heavy industry barging stirs up sediments in the past. And we also have collaboration about Waterfront Coalition, and I'm hoping to work with Stephanie Lukash and the Harbor Village Marina folks, because we need 100-year approach to saving our salmon and having public health and safety take priority over heavy industry and commerce, in my opinion. And thank you again for what you've been doing.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Patrick O'Brien, followed by Glenn Rogers and Carl Michaelman.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. I agree with everything Mrs. Mooney said. And I'd like to also say that you have the authority to regulate what's going on at Lake Point. And that is where they broke up the old 520 bridge. They lied about what was in it, lead, all sorts of chemicals. And then they broke it up out there where the old bridge was. They brought it in, they transported it onto Lake Point, was draining water everywhere, debris. That place is a hazardous waste dump. As you know, it's one of the top 10 hazardous waste dumps in the state. So you need to regulate that. They've been doing a lot of nearshore work. They've been stacking lots of gravel, moving around. They think they're just going to cap it and then put people there, and it's going to continue to pollute the north end of Lake Washington. And none of you should be allowing your kids to go into the sediment at Log Boom Park. It is toxic, and they have posted it as toxic for if you were to catch fish, you were not to eat them. So look in the past and you'll know what's there, especially the Army Corps of Engineers testing that was done to 6 feet. So my next thing is, I'm pretty appalled at the decision you made to put the gay flag on the steps. It seemed like a really truncated, funky way you came to that decision, and there wasn't any public comment. I was ready to comment last week, as you well know, but that wasn't permitted. You cannot have something called art when any painting contractor can paint it. That's not art. That's propaganda. It is propaganda, and you're pushing the agenda. When the White House today has 2 United States flags and a gay flag at a higher level in the middle of the White House, that's a travesty. That is a travesty to have it here. It's not universally accepted. We don't want it on our government buildings. We didn't want Black Lives Matter because, you know, that turned out to be a political movement that embezzled millions and millions of dollars. You're doing this all out of, you know, I don't know what it is with you guys, but it certainly doesn't represent your community. The red, white, and blue, that's our flag. It covers everybody all the time. And the 4th of July is when we all have independence under equality, not equity. There is no equity in our Constitution. It's equality. That means you treat everybody with the blinders on. They all get the same thing. And, you know we don't have that right now. So there's a lot more things I'd like to, and you know, we have to keep this flag that we don't like. We have to keep it, the upkeep of it, the city pays for it in perpetuity. What is that? I mean, you guys were not thinking.
Thank you.
And you don't have the okay from the majority of people in Kenmore.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Glenn Rogers and Carl Michaelman.
My name is Glenn Rogers. I live at 19823 64th Avenue Northeast, Kenmore, Washington. We've lived here in Kenmore for 40 years, and I worked as a city council member for 10 years prior in that time. Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, and citizens of Kenmore. I'm here to address the contract that includes the painting of the steps of City Hall. I'm not here to address the bigger politics of this topic, but I'm here to address the process you, as our elected city council, used for approving this contract, which included the painting of the City Hall entry steps. It is my understanding that this matter was brought up by the Arts of Kenmore community in the month of May. A 15-year contract that includes the steps and subsequently was approved during that meeting. A second meeting dealing only with this single issue, the painting of the steps, was held on another evening for additional council discussion. It also, my understanding that citizen input was not allowed at the second meeting. I also understand that this is a temporary activity, but an activity that allows for renewal every 5 years. So you add 15 years of paint Another 5, another 5, and another 5. Is that what we want to do? I'm not sure. I'm sure. Without any real time given to the public, this activity is being put into a reality with painting scheduled for July of this year. Again, without public input. I understand that this has legal approval and is covered by something called government speech. What is government speech? Ask your council members. My question to you is, when did you, council, start speaking on behalf of the citizens of Kenmore on topics like this without hearing from us, the citizens? The topic that needs to be addressed is the colors being used. The proposed colors are that of the LGBT. What happened to previous ordinances that restricted any public display of religious symbols, holiday decor, political emblems, the citywide holiday party in City Hall, and even a star on a tree? Would this proposed activity contradict a previous ordinance? These painted steps represent a political group. No matter how you look at it, it is what it is. What you're doing here is making a political statement on a government structure, our City Hall. This building should
Thank you, Mr.
represent
Rogers.
all citizens of Kenmore. This appears to me a violation of previous ordinance. In conclusion, I
Carl
ask that you
Michaelman?
consider the following options. Put off the July painting,
Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry,
open
but
up the
your
conversion
time is up.
conversation. May I finish, please? I've only got another couple seconds.
Please wrap up.
Open up the conversation, advertise the activity, and allow the citizens of Kenmore to speak their mind. And then make a decision based on the input of your constituents. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Sir.
Hi, Council. I am Carl Michaelman, property business owner and a non-resident according to Karina File. So here's the deal. What's happening is with the steps that are going on, we've had no say. This has been championed by Karina File. Karina states, and I'm going to quote your meeting on Saturday. You said the LGBTQ has been harassed, violent harassment. Let me tell you something, I'm Jewish. Let me tell you, I've had family that's been in the Holocaust in Auschwitz that died. So let me tell you, it's not about just LGBTQ, excuse me. This is becoming very frustrating because it is a political statement. I have no problem with it, okay? Yeah, we can do something, get another flagpole. All right, but the way you guys have made your decision without having us, the people involved, is absolutely ridiculous. Again, we're back to this council is self-agenda. You bring your transgender son in whenever you can. You made a complaint against David Baker at the beginning of his term or your term, and it cost the city $29,000. I asked for the depositions. The deposition said, what you said is, I'm an abused woman and my son's transgender. Well, let me tell you, that had nothing to do with your complaint with David Baker. You like to throw this in our face. This is all about you. It's a self-agenda situation. Let's be honest. Melanie, you spoke yesterday or last week when you said, I like to see lights, okay? It's not about Melanie. It's about us. And then Nigel, you said, you know, what happened was we got this the day of March, was it May 22nd? I didn't know anything about it. And you guys didn't have time to talk about this. It was just shoved down our throats. Let's wake up here. A year ago, I sat here speaking, you're not listening to the people. I don't have a problem with the pride. I am all for it. I have a flagpole at my office with the pride flag. What you're doing to the city, though, to put those stairs and put that as the rainbow, it's not temporary, as you said, Karina, on your meeting last week. Absolutely not. Temporary, it'd be there for a few days. Okay? No, this is permanent. And what's happening is you folks will find out when it comes voting, you're not listening. Again, you're not listening. Get the wax out and listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelman. Mayor, we do have some virtual public comment requests. If it's okay to proceed, we'd like to take them in this order. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by Vicky Grayland and Jim Myers. Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Our city celebrates equality, yet we know our residents came forward after being belittled and bullied, suppressed of their opinions because they did not follow what the city officials or staff wanted as their agenda. What we need is an apology and accountability. Our residents surveyed totals are overlooked for staff and, of course, our city leaders' wants. We continue to ask for transparency, resident concerns, and likes, apologies and accountabilities. The EV should be placed where the residents state the need is. Another thing. We claim we are a safe city, yet residents are claiming that there's been 3 attacks right there near City Hall. 10 boys in the latest one beat up a girl. There was another incident at Spencer 68 where the boy had been hospitalized for a cracked skull. And there's another one that was near the skate park. What are we doing for public safety? Why is this going on right here by the police station? I know that last time, the voter box, there was somebody standing out there telling people they had to go elsewhere. And yet, when it was brought to the secretary's attention, nobody bothered to call King County Elections. So I finally did. This should not fall on residents to do. It should be done by the city. So is there camera action that the city has for anything being done right there at City Hall? What can we do to make Kenmore safer, to make Kenmore more transparent, to make to where the residents feel like they really have a voice? Because as you could tell again tonight, we do not feel like you're listening. We do not want the steps to look like a daycare with a rainbow. We think it should go somewhere else. We think on our property, city property, or the public's property, we should be involved with decisions. It's our city after all. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Vicky Grayland, can you hear us? Victoria Grayland, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, speaking of not being listened to, I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement, which has been missing from our city council meetings for months. On behalf of the city, the citizens of Kenmore, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, a people that are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. Thank you for that. I would like to acknowledge the Black Students Union, of Inglemore High School. I went to high school in Chicago suburb of Maywood with Fred Hampton. And I will always remember what he said when he welcomed us back to school after the school shut down for a week in April of '68. And it was after the assassination of Martin Luther King. He said, go back to school, get a great education, and change the world. And I would like to acknowledge my fellow citizens of Kenmore. Yes, we feel like we're not acknowledged. I'd like to thank the city for hiring a lobbyist to get funding for a climate action plan. I think that was a very good move. I would like to also say that I am for the measure, the pride measure. I'm fine with painting steps different colors. It's fine. I'm fine with that. And I don't understand why people have such a emotional reaction to it. I think what Angela Kugler said last week was fine. She said, you don't have to retake this vote. Just abstain if you don't understand it. So I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland, and good night. Jim Myers, followed by Janet Hayes. Jim Myers, can you hear us?
How's that, better?
Much better. We hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jim Myers. I'm a resident of Kenmore, and here to talk about one of the great resources of Kenmore, the city by the lake. The lake is, of course, Lake Washington. And as beautiful as it is, when we look out across it, beneath its waters, there are a host of issues that need to be addressed and need to be carefully tended to. This is a legacy of toxics that have been put there from when the waterfront was much more industrial than it is now, and from potentially from ongoing industry. As has been pointed out, the Lake Point site was is a toxic Modca site, and is being held in I think in conservancy for until it gets cleaned up. But the lake bed itself has been tested several times by the Army Corps of Engineers, DNR, and other agencies, and any number of toxics, PCBs, dioxins, DDT, tributyl tin have been found in its sediments. Also, the birthing channel, where there's ongoing industry now, has been cited for Clean Water Act violations having to do with the painting of some of these ship paints. But the sediments in the birthing channel, which one would predict would be worse than those in the outer lake, those have never been tested, at least not, the results have not been made public. So I would ask the city to be very cautious in having any dredging activities now that we have this wonderful Log Boom Park Beach, which is just downstream of the birthing channel. So any disturbance of those sediments could release toxins, but we don't know what those are. And again, I think one could easily calm any of these fears by simply testing and being very public and transparent about the process. And I would encourage this, either the city or the city to ask some of the other agencies whose authority it is to test to take this on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Janet Hayes, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
All right, my name is Janet Hayes and I'm a resident of Kenmore. I have been following all that happens at the Lake Point facility, the Lake Point properties, the asphalt plant, cement plant, Kenmore Air. And I received a notice of dredging the birthing channel. I had never heard it called. The name of the where it is on the permit or the application is Kenmore Waterway, Lake Washington. This is a big enough project that I believe the comment period should be extended. I also believe you need to call this what it is known by, to the Army Corps of Engineers, to the city in Kenmore who do listen to our public comments. It is the Kenmore Private Birthing Channel. Maybe Glacier Northwest needs to know that and change their application. Why, considering the Motka site that surrounds this channel, why didn't the city go for a mitigated determination of non-significance? We may even need a public meeting because this is very vital. There have been clean water violations. 3 of them I was involved with, and Waterfront Construction actually left their plot that they had leased from Mr. Sargent. They brought in dredge from the Hog Canal that was not to go in open waters. They dumped it upland. Kiewit, who brought the rubble, had a Clean Water Act against them. And because it was all going into that birthing channel that you are going to get tested. Arsenic was what was found in the concrete cement that was brought. The old concrete and cement was full of it. So you're trying to make it sound simple, like Kenmore Waterway. That's not true. That could be Log Boom Park is a little creek, anything. Please do this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Mayor Herbig, I see no additional hands raised.
All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. Next up on the business agenda, consultant PRR presentation on missing middle housing fines, policy and regulation analysis, public engagement and racial equity analysis presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent, PRR Public Engagement Specialist Michelle Oster, and PRR Senior Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Kiana Wheeler, and LDC Corp Director of Planning Clay White.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So before we do have a PowerPoint presentation, but before we do that, I'd just like to provide some context of why we're here, the purpose of this evening, and next steps. So why are we here to have this discussion about increasing housing supply or missing middle? Well, if you remember last November, you passed an ordinance, you passed a comp plan changes, which would allow medium density within a quarter mile of the city's 2 transit corridors. At that time, you did not adopt any implementing regulations. That's what happened in November. Earlier in the year, we had applied to the Department of Commerce for a missing middle grant to assist with public participation, to do a code analysis, and the grant also required a racial equity analysis of policies. So we received the grant, and we then hired PRR as the consultant for that scope of work. So PRR did the public engagement outreach, which was something that the council was interested in seeing, additional public outreach related to missing middle. They did the racial equity analysis, and they did the analysis of code. This has been a pretty fast turnaround. I do not have the final deliverables yet, but those final reports, along with the final report from the community business outreach, which, if you recall, we have an agreement with Arch for a consultant who did that work, along with guidance from the Department of Commerce, will all then be used for staff to bring forward in the fall some recommendations for a strategy and options for moving forward with missing middle policies and regulations. So that's where we are. That's where we've been, that's where we currently are, and that's the direction for where we're going. In the midst of all this, as we were having this missing middle project, working through the Department of Commerce scope, the state passed legislation in May. So that was right in the midst of all this. So we also have to consider that when the city is considering options in terms of the recent state legislation that was passed for missing middle and also accessory dwelling units. So we have to take all this information and come back with a future strategy. So this evening, PRR are here to kind of give you an insight into how they completed the work and some preliminary discussion of the results. So in light of that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, Kiana, and Clay to go through the PowerPoint presentation. And then following the presentation, we are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Debbie, for that. And hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here tonight. We're very excited. My name is Michelle Oster. I am looking forward to sharing more about our work to assess housing code for middle housing in Kenmore, along with my colleague Kiana Wheeler, also at PRR, and Clay White of LDC, which of course Debbie already generously introduced us. So first, we're going to share what our team was tasked with. I'll share later on a little bit about our community engagement approach, our activities and results. Kiana will share about our racial equity report, which is yet to be finalized. And Clay will end us out with getting into the nitty-gritty on code options, also yet to be finalized, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So Clay is going to share more now about the grant from Commerce and how our work tied into the comprehensive plan update.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. So just going to kick off with a little bit of a broad overview of the project and kind of the schedule. So the Middle Housing Grant Program was authorized by the 2022 supplemental state budget. It directed the Department of Commerce to develop a grant program to support the adoption of ordinances authorizing middle housing types, and we'll go through that in a little bit. As part of the project, we are developing a middle housing code report. And I think about this as just tools in the tool belt. These are ideas and options, and when we get into the engagement, it's an opportunity to engage with the community on a specific issue outside of the comprehensive plan update, where you're talking about parks and utilities and capital facilities and all of these things. Of we could break this out, and these can be things that you can use as a later date. So as part of the project, the grant program is also focused on completing a racial equity analysis on the current comprehensive plan and code, and engaging the community throughout the process. And we'll be chatting about that in a moment. You'll hear about more each of these elements as we do our presentation. It's important to note that the project will not result in any legislative changes. So I'm kind of just mentioning this as we tool these things up for those that are listening tonight as well. These are just ideas and concepts and things that you can consider as that process rolls out. Next slide. So just a reminder for some that middle housing is also commonly referred to as missing middle housing, and it is defined in the Growth Management Act through House Bill 1337. They've now defined it in statute as buildings that are compatible in scale, form, and character with single-family houses and contain 2 or more attached stacked or clustered homes, including duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, townhomes, stacked flats, courtyard apartments, and cottage housing. It's often referred to as missing middle because the demand for this type of housing has exceeded how much is available. And, it's typically, we talk about affordable housing. It may not always be affordable to people making certain incomes, but it's typically more affordable than single-family detached homes. And it's had some great conversations in communities over the last few months. And this anecdote of when you bought your first home, sometimes it was that starter home. It was that small 1,100 square foot home, and it was that first thing that you could purchase. And that's not really available anymore. They're very expensive or they've been replaced. Sometimes attached housing is that first entry point for someone who can purchase a home, or those looking to downsize or looking for different housing types. Next slide. So, the way I always think about it is that planning is a balance between state and regional requirements and substantial local deference, which is afforded to the city. So it can plan in the way that's best for the community. So it's always this balancing act. The city of Kenmore is preparing to update its comprehensive plan. An important part of that project is meeting housing element requirements under the Growth Management Act. So there's a number of different elements within a comprehensive plan that are required by GMA. One of those is certainly housing. In 2021, House Bill 1220 passed and was signed into law, which significantly modified the requirements for housing. And it's the first big update in 30 years, and it really modified what cities and counties are required to do as part of planning. Some of the new requirements relate to providing more options for middle housing and addressing both displacement and equity in housing. So all of the things that are being done as part of this project are things that you're going to be doing as part of that comprehensive plan update. There are also new requirements to plan for housing by different income bands. So while it used to be that you would get a growth target and you would provide capacity so you could accommodate that growth, now it's in buckets. So it's planning to make sure that there's housing that's available and affordable for those making different incomes. And so it's new and it's a challenge, and it's what all the communities in the state are starting that process now. And at this point, I think I can hand it back over to Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Clay. I was excited to lead our community engagement efforts on this project. We had experience going in from some of our prior partnerships with the city of Kenmore supporting the comprehensive plan development and updates. And we were wanting to build off of that good prior work as we went into this project. Our approach was intentionally informed by that prior engagement and chosen as a way to help deepen the conversation already happening in Kenmore. In the beginning of this work, we completed an audit of prior engagement efforts, which showed us that the city had, among other things, had been doing an impeccable job already of answering community questions in a factual, calm, very technical manner. That told us that the pure information about middle housing in Kenmore was very well handled. And the value that we could add was in steering conversations toward a values-based place, sort of getting behind that technical messaging and speaking to what the community holds dear. We modeled our activities out of this lens and developed values-based messaging that the city could use in future communications. We also trained the city partners on something called Tipping Point Framework, which is designed not to drive change, but to cultivate and leverage residents' abilities to adapt and grow as change take place. It was also important for us to promote long-term sustainable engagement and hopefully gain ambassadors in the community, which both Tipping Point Framework and values-based engagement supported. This approach is how we designed the structure and discussion of the small group meetings. So our goals for these meetings were 1, to engage a targeted constituency, 2, build and grow positive relationships with community members, 3, and bring the community along in preparing them for missing middle housing. So our outreach aimed to center priority communities that the city helped us to determine, including students, renters, youth, and seniors. We advertise for these meetings, just getting into the outreach here. We advertise for these meetings on existing city channels, and we developed an informational flyer, and we also had one-on-one communications with other folks. Participants were able to register themselves online through an English or Spanish language form, or contact project team members directly. We held 5 of these meetings, and we limited participation to 15 registrants each to keep the rooms not too large to foster good conversation. We held meetings, these were on April 15th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 24th. Unfortunately, despite parallel and unique and customized efforts to hold a meeting in Spanish with Kenmore's Spanish using community, we were unable to schedule that. Each meeting, I was really blown away. Each meeting saw deeply passionate and well-informed community members participating who, on the whole, had positive outlooks on missing middle housing and wished to see a better future in their city in terms of housing choice for all. In particular, most conversations landed on these broad topics listed here: green space, supportive infrastructure, and a variety in home offerings and affordability. These were all strongly expressed priorities shared by most participants throughout all 5 meetings. Individual summaries and a comprehensive summary were all deliverables for this project and are available upon request. I mean, Debbie can, yeah. I'm also pleased to share that we were able to host an in-person engagement event for the whole city. I was unable to attend myself in person, but we have 2 folks in the room right now who were there. We were lucky to have some great weather, and we welcomed over 50 visitors to the plaza at the hangar across the street. We had 3 activity stations with activities that were all designed off of feedback we'd heard through prior engagement efforts and bringing in that values-based approach that we had been working to imbue throughout this whole process. We delivered a thorough notification plan to support outreach in English and Spanish. And that outreach went through all the channels used for the small group meetings. Plus the postcard was developed and sent to all residents that the city ordered and created. We currently have a draft of the event summary that we're working on, and we have delivered since then all of the community comments and email signups. I'm going to pass it to Kiana now to share more about our racial equity report.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. My name is Kiana Wheeler. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as Black. I've been doing racial equity work for over 25 years. And what I tell people is I teach folks to be human together. And that's really the center of the report, is really understanding what are the systemic things that are in the way of us being able to be human together. Next slide. What we see today and the reason why we are having parts of these conversations are things that are visible. Kenmore is continuing to grow as a vital location within King County. And it is a desirable, accessible, visible Kenmore. It is desirable because it is accessible. It is easy to get to from many places. The location is prime. It is also visible because it's award-winning and folks do want to live here. What that means is that as we continue to expand in Kenmore, is that the diversity of identities will continue to expand, specifically across income levels and in the multi-languages. This is also important because Kenmore will need to plan. You can go to the next one. Yeah, you can put them all if you like. Thank you. Kenmore will need to plan for flexibility among options that lead to economic access within housing. And what that means is that we can see the community change. Folks at every phase of life are moving into Kenmore. People with young children, seniors vulnerable to costs, as well as, because of cost, the need to have multi-generational homes where people are both taking care of their parents and their children, or even multi-generational homes where grandparents are caring for grandchildren. those kinds of shifts in the way that people experience housing, we will need to be flexible. And part of that means that government, community, and businesses will need to collaborate around the shared values and the goals so that we can continue to do the human work we need to do. What we don't see often is that a lot of that growth is mandated at different areas in the region. The Growth Management Act updates the city growth targets, and so we are handed some of those targets around the amount of population needing to be absorbed. What also we don't see is that the cities get designated, they get identified, their use within the region, and Kenmore has been identified as a high capacity transit community. And for those who aren't aware, what that means is that they're part of the regional transit landscape with expected light rail to come through. And we can only imagine that's going to continue to grow. And so that gets us right back to the need to plan for housing at all income levels, and understanding that some folks are picking up and rerouting in Kenmore to find the community that they seek. Other folks are seeking options away from urban areas. Other folks are being forced out and are looking for places to accommodate so that they can maintain the locations that they've been needing to travel to for work and for education. So the report focuses both on land use and environment. That was the request of Commerce. And really it focuses on how people route in place. Research will tell us if we do not route, then we do not make it in a neighborhood. And that continues to threaten displacement. The report centers on the connections between people in place, specifically for that rerouting. It identifies community access opportunities and needs that people have who currently live and who currently are moving into the area. And it's really the importance of how people thrive. It is about how communities maintain their connections between each other and connections with the place in which they live. That incorporates housing. And in the report, the goals of the report is to support and ensure that Kenmore has, I loved how Clay put it, tools in the toolbox, right? And not everything's a hammer, but what do we reach for when we need it is available to us. It also provides analysis for ways to understand when threat may be coming for displacement and things that increase displacement risks. We are aware that there is a map from the Puget Sound Regional Council that helps cities, they can go to it, look for where displacement is happening. But one of the main pieces is to understand how those individual risks play out in a community, especially when layers begin to be layered upon them or are already rooted because of historical inequity. The methods used to create a tool for looking for assessing this effort were the combination of a number of tools that are currently developed in Seattle. Having worked for the City of Seattle's Race and Social Justice Initiative for over 20 years, I was instrumental in supporting some of the development of these. And one of the things that is very important as we understand, and I'll name how they function individually, but one of the things that's important to understand is that often, not necessarily Kenmore, but often people look at what is happening in Kenmore and will note that it is a response to what is happening at a larger regional scale. And what I look at these and understand, and I believe that all of you do, because your comp plan has a lot of this in there, is we look at it and understand it's our opportunity to define a future for Kenmore, not simply respond to what is happening at the larger regions. The frameworks that were used were Port of Seattle's Opportunity Index, which maps how opportunities are laid out. People who are closer to opportunities are more likely to reach success. It looks at City of Seattle's 4 levels of racism and inequity, which helps us understand that there are structural, society level needs that push down on our institutional level efforts, and the City of Kenmore would be considered the institution in that space. And also it helps understand what it means for the institution to make recommendations and policies that communities must consider, as well as what it means for people to be part of those communities that must consider. The King County's determinants of equity frames out how equity functions regionally within different neighborhoods to make sure that that there is opportunity for equity at every distributed across every section of a city. And the social determinants of health are a wide-ranging framework that is used to understand how the non-medical considerations do have an impact on our health at a neighborhood level. And while it is generally county or state that function to address public health, it is the people who are closest to the people who actually get to do that work and support it, and that is city government. In connecting these frameworks allows us to see systems very, very clearly, how they're playing out and functioning on decisions that we have to make. And so it helps to understand what those systems do when we are looking at policies and practices for the city that Kenmore is, the city that Kenmore has been, and the city Kenmore wants to become. So a number of themes that are related to understanding the way in which those 4 frameworks come into play is understanding the historical context, understanding the long-term effects of larger regional needs and shifts on individual communities, as well as across communities and cities. And understanding how those played out into zoning practices that today has had impact on affordability and continues to shift the way people move throughout our region. It also connects larger geographical considerations, the way that we see the impacts around the region in the county and then into our individual cities. And it considers considering that Kenmore is a high capacity transit community, what does transportation mean to the city of Kenmore as it connects to the larger considerations within the region? It also addresses public health, excuse me, public planning, city planning, excuse me. City planning had, was concerned with public health. That's the way how it developed. And what it means to still consider the health of a community in planning. Planning does still help to support, develop, and give context to. You are the best. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. Thank you. And what that means as cities continue to plan for the health, we learned so much after COVID, during COVID, that we would never have known without COVID. And so how that is incorporated into understanding how we plan for healthy communities that can thrive across different events and situations. And also considers the engagement that really deepens the work of planning across the city and what that means as we consider systems on top of government, on top of community. And so deepening the considerations within community engagement early and often, which is something that you all have articulated multiple times. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great transition. So one of the things that I love so much about planning is that it is a proactive exercise. So when you think about, you know, equity and housing policy, or you think about displacement that could occur in your community as it develops and redevelops, or you think about the growth that's going to occur over time, there's an opportunity to plan for those things before they occur when you're thinking about capital facilities and utilities. And that's part of what this exercise here is, to think about the range of things that are going to be happening as you plan out to 2044 in your next comprehensive plan. And how can you help lead that future? You know, how do you get ahead of these issues that are occurring? So the first thing that we did is to lay that foundation, as we've done 2 reports, one that we're just finishing, one that kind of set that foundation was just a discovery report. So the discovery report, you reviewed existing policies and regulations as it relates to middle housing and small scale commercial development opportunities in the city of Kenmore. So that report, which all of you should have, was broken up into several sections. The report reviews, oh, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm sorry. I'll just automatically switch when you're talking. That's amazing. So the report is broken up into several sections. So the report reviews the existing comprehensive plan and identified areas where new or revised policies could be considered in the future as they relate to middle housing. Now, you just updated your comprehensive plan late last year. So one of the things that we were reviewed for is House Bill 1220 really modified the range of housing issues that you have to plan for. I mean, I like to look at it as it just made it more granular. So instead of like terms like planning for a variety of housing types, it talks about those actual housing types. And it talks about different income bands that you'd be planning for to provide housing that could be affordable to people making different incomes. So, but overall, your policies are in really good shape, but we made suggestions in areas. Now, what's always interesting is I could take a look at a comprehensive plan and say, here's areas you may explore, but it always depends on what actions you're going to take as part of your comprehensive plan. So if you're going to have programs to incentivize certain types of housing in the city, then you would want policy support that. So we've tried to identify, you know, building that support for the programs that you really want to see within the city. The report also reviews the residential zones, the R1, R4, and R6 zones, and outlines different code change options that the city could consider if it wanted to promote certain middle housing types. And so as an example, the R6 zone regulation were analyzed for the ability to facilitate cottage housing, which I know is something that you've talked about here at council before. So this is just kind of an expert from that report. So just kind of talking about what that could look like. So if cottage housing code is developed, there are a few items to consider. It would be important to provide some type of housing incentive. With the current price of land, you know, building smaller homes versus if you could build larger homes in that same lot, it's difficult to get that pencil out. So if someone's looking at a development, choosing cottage housing over a house where you could build a 2,400 square foot home instead of a 1,200 square foot home, unless there's some type of density incentive, they're probably going to choose the larger home because it would just pencil out economically. The other issue is that, you know, currently single family homes require 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit. So a lot of times you see this really nice picture of cottage homes around a courtyard, but what you don't see is the 24 parking spaces behind that. And so unless you're finding a way to, you know, maybe put cottage development near where you have transit options where you could reduce parking, it's, you know, what you end up with is a cottage development still requires all the same things that a regular development occurs. Setbacks from property lines, landscape, stormwater, all of those different things. So it's really important if you develop that code to figure out how it would actually work on the ground so that you get people coming in and saying like, that's a great option. It'll be aesthetically pleasing. It provides homes that people want, but it also can work on the ground as well. So those are the types of things that we go through within the report. You can go to the next slide. And so what we did is we tried to go through and go through some scenarios. And we went through and kind of looked at 3 options. What would it look like to permit duplexes and triplexes in the R6 zone within a quarter mile of high capacity transit, something that you guys have looked at before, expanding middle housing options in the R1 and R4 and R6 zones. And then option 3 was the middle housing bills that we didn't know if they were going to pass. So we're looking at this range. So for all the options that we, you know, although that we've had these big housing bills pass, all the information in the report that's looking at different scenarios that you could be looking at, I think it's still really good information because we did a lot of GIS mapping to show you where those areas are. where you have capacity, so where there are areas that are more likely to develop or redevelop during the planning period. You know, and then also looking at pros, cons, policies, other things, so you can kind of just flesh out these kind of meaty topics. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we were really at that point looking at coming to you with, hey, we have this range. There's fewer code changes and opportunities for middle housing on kind of one end, and then you balance that with, you know, what might look like as more code option or mode code changes that would increase opportunities for middle housing. And then hopefully as the comprehensive plan process goes forward, then you could select somewhere in the range that also hits other goals you're trying to accomplish, like, you know, providing enough capacity to meet your housing target for, you know, people at different income bands. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But then the legislative session happened. And so there are two primary bills which the city will be addressing as part of the comprehensive plan update. The first is House Bill 1337, and it was passed during this last legislative session. It's an act related to expanding housing options by easing barriers to the construction and use of accessory dwelling units. So I know this was in your agenda bill. I'll just go through there's a lot of like bullets of things that this will require the city to evaluate. But here's just a few. So it requires the city to allow at least 2 accessory dwelling units on all residential lots. You could configure them as allowing 1 attached and 1 detached unit, 2 attached, 2 detached. It states that the owner of the lot in which there's an ADU is not required to have that occupancy requirement. And so there isn't, somebody doesn't have to live in the primary home or the ADU. You can restrict vacation rentals. Impact fees have to be reduced for ADUs. They can only be 50% of what's charged for other units. And then there's a lot of bulk standard requirements of saying, you know, you can't restrict ADUs more than you do, you know, a regular single family home in terms of setbacks, impervious standards. And so there's a lot of requirements like that. You have to require the conversion of garages to ADUs. And then they can be condominiumized and sold as well. The other piece I know that may be a big deal for the city is that it requires that you cannot require public street improvements as a condition of permitting ADUs. So a few on the other side of this, when codes are updated to address this legislation, it is exempt from SEPA and Growth Management Act appeals. There are also limitations for parking, so they'll be looking at parking standards. And there's a provision in state law that it would have to be addressed 6 months after your comprehensive plan update. So that would be June 30th.
Yeah, in your agenda bill, Debbie's done an excellent job of comparing what your current ADU code is compared to the new state law. So it might be worth checking out if you haven't.
Yes, and we're going to work on that as well. So, I mean, I guess the big takeaway from this first bill, and will come up on the second bill, is it just considering the timing of when you're going to take up this legislation. So there's some advantages. So you could wait until your comprehensive plan update is taken care of and then come back and then take a look at some code language at that point. But, you know, it may be advantageous to consider this during the comprehensive plan update. And some of the reasons, completing this concurrently with the update would allow you to address these new requirements in tandem with the process to address growth out to 2044. This includes the impact of this action on meeting housing targets, impacts the capital facilities, and policies and regulations needed to support the actions needed to bill. So you could be looking at this in totality with all the other actions you're taking as part of the plan. And then, you know, also there's some efficiency in opening up code and all the process that goes along with it. Go to the next bill. Great. So the second bill is House Bill 1110, and it's an act related to increasing middle housing in areas traditionally dedicated to single family detached housing. So House Bill 1110 has different requirements for cities with a population over and under 25,000. The Office of Financial Management estimates the 2022 population for the city of Kenmore at 24,090. So you're so close to that, kind of going over that threshold. You're not there now. So, you know, I would think based upon your growth trends for the last 15 years, you probably have till 2025 or 2026 until you reach over that threshold. It may be sooner. So the provisions of the bill have to be also updated or included by June 30th, of 2025. And there's a little bit of a difference between the under 25,000 and the over 25,000. So for cities with a population under 25,000, the city would be required to allow at least 2 residential units on every single family lot. For the over 25,000, it also includes that requirement, but also includes the allowance for 4 units per lot within 0.25 miles walking distance of a major transit stop. One thing to note for this is that they have redefined transit stop, major transit stop. And so it doesn't include like the 15-minute bus service. And so we had done some mapping of the quarter-mile distance, and I'm not sure, I think we have to get some clarity on just exactly where that quarter-mile would apply to in the city. So we're doing some research on that right now. The other is it would require 4 units per lot if at least one of the units is affordable. The bill outlines how you have to enforce this affordability factor, which is not something that a city typically does. So there's a number of things that are a challenge. There are a number of provisions that apply to both options. And so the requirements do not apply to lots that are designated as critical areas. And there are some other locational information on where you wouldn't have to apply watersheds serving a reservoir for potable water if that watershed is listed as impaired or threatened. There's some alternative options in the state law that allow you to kind of not just apply it in a blanket way, but to only apply it to certain portions of residential areas. But there's a whole bunch of criteria you have to meet and processes that you have to work through with the Department of Commerce. And the bill has a number of other administrative, it limits design review. You can't require more restrictive requirements than you do for single family homes. And, you know, but within both bills, you'll find that there's a lot of bulk standard requirements for like the ADU bill, for example. You know, you can't limit them to under 24 feet in height and some other things. So the thing I'll just kind of caution reading these bills, because I work on a lot of legislation, is there's a lot of language in there that isn't 100% clear. Like a planner that writes code may not have written all these portions of these sections. So I think there's going to be some work that all of you will do to kind of figure out what is that path on all of these, and then kind of when do you want to do it. So our final report is evaluating each one of these bills. We're evaluating your policies and your code to kind of look at and say, here's different code sections you might consider depending on the paths that you take for each one of these. So we'll have that report next week, and hopefully that at least provides some guidance and makes things a little easier as you take on these tasks as part of your comprehensive plan.
And we're going to get additional guidance from Commerce on what these bills mean. Is that right?
Correct.
And how long will that take?
They're working on it right now. In fact, for the reports we're doing, everything has quick links in it, quick links to the bill report, and there's guidance already from Commerce. So for both bills. And so the ADU bill has a lot more guidance. The 1110 has just like a fact sheet, but they're working on that as well. So I've got you links to everything that you could be using.
Yeah, like the interpretation on what transit means, being within a quarter mile of that. And then there was whether duplexes would still be required, or if ADUs meet the second unit requirement. Clarifications like that still need to come out, correct?
Correct, although it does talk about in House Bill 1110, the middle housing bill, that ADUs could be utilized. So there is some incorporating these two bills together and getting something out on the other side. So I think that you may be able to use ADUs, but there's strange language in the bill, like you have to permit 6 out of the 9 middle housing types in your zones. And so it's like, if you only allow 2 units, you know, why would you need a 6-plex to be permitted? And the fact is your code already allows attached housing types. And so you may already be there, but so there's some kind of things that seem a little incongruent. Again, the guidance will help. This is so new, and I think that Commerce will be working on this over the next few months in time for you to really, consider it as part of your comp plan update.
Councilor Fowler, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the ADUs, clarification a bit further along is that one that's easier to move upon a little quicker with. I'm thinking about both timeline and kind of gentle growing with our community and allowing that growth to happen in certain areas. Seems like it might be a little logical to start there and roll into the others gracefully as we move along. And then the other thing is related to the 6 out of 9 types. I believe that was about the giving a little bit more option and opportunity, as the data is very clear that affordability comes at 4 units or greater, and facades can be part of code that we consider that both add with beautification and fit into or a singular kind of neighborhood. I know that this is not the type for that kind of neighborhood, but it can have that appearance, not uncommonly done in many other states, and it's very attractive. So it can allow for beautification. I'm just thinking that after visiting the Bothell missing middle housing discussion and their forums, they came to look closer at multiple units, but at least 1 unit has to be affordable in their code that they're considering. This kind of has something a little similar, but not quite as quick to the point. They're trying to address their housing crisis in layers and also with significant action. What's your thoughts on that kind of approach as well?
Yeah, well, the affordable housing, I think the biggest thing for affordable housing is just how that actually gets implemented and how it gets tracked by, that's not something that the city usually does. So I'm wondering if, as this moves forward, there'll be regional organizations that will assist local governments and at implementing this at more of a regional level instead of a city by city level, because that's a lot for a city to have to monitor. In terms of allowing multiple types of, of a range of middle housing types, from cottage to, duplexes and triplexes and on, there's a little nuance to this as well. So there's development and redevelopment, then there's lot development. And so typically you would have a green field, and you would say, we allow 6 dwelling units per acre, and these are the housing types that we allow. Or you're redeveloping a piece of property and you have the same thing. So you have this density issue. This is moving away from that because there is no density considerations when you're allowing another home on the lot or ADU. And so one of the things that you're going to have to figure out is how do you separate those issues in terms of, theoretically applying this, you could do a 4-lot short plat and then put 4 units on each of the lots, and then condo each one of them, or do a subdivision of each one of them. And so there's this kind of nuance on how it's going to be implemented by what the statute talks about. And so I know we're going to work through that as well.
And on the environmental piece, it's very clear that the laws are very strict about no steep ravines, no steep inclines, no building on environmentally sensitive spaces, habitats, and wetlands, for example. I'm saying that for our community at home who are very confused about what's happening because there's been so much thrown at them. And I want to make sure that we're bringing our community with us.
And you're correct, council member. This, both pieces of legislation would not circumvent critical areas, shoreline regulations. Any development would have to comply with those regulations, just as they would today.
And my last question has more to do with our ability to work with our partners for safe and safety and well-being. So as we're growing with our density in some areas and in some types of arrangements, it has come to my attention that not always are there plans for, how to get out of that second story ADU unit or that, quad unit. I think we have to think about our community safety, both safe access and to be able to serve our community and respond, let alone people's ability to leave the environment they're in for safety. So I just want to put those little levers out on your table, not like you have enough already,
No,
right?
You're absolutely correct. And this is going to be a lot to work through as you're transitioning code a little bit to how does it apply to a number of things, including safety and in your community.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we can go to the next slide. We can probably just go. So we're just, there's a few kind of check the boxes for the Department of Commerce and the grant. So we're completing that overview of the legislation, and it'll highlight how you're providing middle housing on at least 30% of the, or at least zoned for it, that you can provide middle housing on 30% of the residential lots. You already have zoning that allows a variety of housing types. It may not always get built because of the bulk standard requirements. So I think you're already there. And then we'll just give you the options ideas that, again, are just tools in the tool belt. And hopefully some of them are just ideas that will help you get from the place you are to that place where you want to be as part of you, as you plan for the future. I think that's it. Any other questions? I know
Yes,
we're all
it
here.
is. Thank you so much, Clay. Thank you, Kiana. Do y'all have any more questions for us?
Questions? Oh, Councilmember Shrubnik, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have several comments and a question. I'm sorry, my son is coming in at a funny angle here, so I apologize. Probably just take off the video here. Well, I really appreciate you doing this work. It's a broad range of tasks that were required. But I have several concerns. One is that it's nearly impossible to really understand or comment on this presentation without having the report, except to say that the range of tasks that were required do not appear to be pulled together in any meaningful way. And I guess I hope that the report does a better job with that. And I think we'll want an opportunity to actually digest that and ask questions after we receive it, because it's very challenging to understand this presentation in its absence. Second, I'm uncomfortable with seeing kind of summary and conclusion statements about public input, again, without seeing the underlying data, the methodology, the questions that were posed, and the response rates to something like a survey. I just, I'll look forward to seeing the report and then digesting it. And additionally, I'm disappointed, more than disappointed, that there really weren't any Spanish language input sessions. I'm dismayed that we're even talking about equity when we didn't have any process in a second language. I don't know how we can be discussing those things in tandem. And I guess finally, my final piece does relate to a question. I'm a big proponent of missing middle housing. I certainly believe we need more diverse housing stock. I do continue to say that there is a model missing from the missing middle continuum. And notably, it's the type that PRR talked about right at the top of this presentation, which is the fact that most people started, at least back in the day, or would like to start now, their home ownership with small detached houses. They don't exist anymore. Not necessarily a complex of cottage houses, that's a different animal, but just small houses. So I guess I don't know whether it's in this report or some other analysis of, what are the factors that are driving that? Why is it impossible for us to even talk about that within the frame of missing middle? Are there zoning, regulatory, or incentive strategies to increase the stock of small homes? So that's my question.
And
I'd like to start a little bit. Thank you, Councilman Shrubnik. I try to keep notes here and I appreciate your thorough questions, as with all the council member comments this evening. So in terms of the reports, yes, those will be available to council. Again, this is a timing issue, is those reports are due. We just kind of finished the engagement. You will get those reports, and those reports will be part of the presentation later in the fall when we look at not only the reports, but the other input, so we can develop some strategies and options for how council moves forward. So I appreciate your disappointment on not having those this evening. In terms of Spanish language, the materials that we had for the public engagement were all in Spanish. We did significant outreach to the Spanish community with a Spanish speaker who is on the PRR staff, who went to specific, for example, Spanish businesses to get the word out there. We had flyers that we handed out. We did a great effort for outreach to try and engage those, to try and make the Spanish speaking community feel comfortable to participate. We had a Spanish speaker at the recent event, 6/3, with a name tag to say, if you speak Spanish, we have that available. So we did our best to try and get Spanish engagement, particularly in the small groups. It just didn't happen. It wasn't for the lack of trying. And I'd like, Michelle has some comments to add to that, but before we get to that, the last question on small houses, why aren't we getting those? Why are we getting bigger homes? Because we don't really have the codes in place to restrict the size of homes. If you want to do that, that's what we need to take a look at. And looking at smaller homes and smaller lots should be done in tandem with looking at regulations for missing middle. So I'll stop talking and I'll let Michelle speak more to the Spanish language question.
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, you covered most of it. What I wanted to add is that we really customized our approach and our Spanish engagement with someone who not only is a part of the PRR team, but has done it already for the city of Kenmore and was already leaning on relationships that had been built through his prior engagement. We customized the timeline for his outreach to give him as much time as possible to conduct this and to go about it in a relationship focused manner. We developed not only all of our materials in English and Spanish, but even additional materials in Spanish with different images and language that would resonate more with that community. We are still, of course, finalizing our summary in which he's adding a lot of his own reflections, but from my understanding and communications with him, there simply weren't the numbers or the interest. We did come very close, and a lot of that was due to relationships with the school and a local church. And we absolutely encourage the city to continue leaning on those relationships. Unfortunately for this event, it simply did not happen.
Councilmember Marshall. Thank you. More comments this evening. So I see the findings of the public outreach that we did get as consistent with the decisions that have been previously made on missing middle in Kenmore after much public output and vigorous debate. The decisions of the Planning Commission, the sentiments expressed by the public in our public meetings, and then the ultimate most recent decision of the City Council, which was to entertain missing middle, making certain there's a balance as we approach this, and also a walkability, that quarter mile to transit, making sure that that's where it's going to happen. That's the zone it should happen in. I think
those values are perfectly consistent with what your outreach was. I think that's great. That green space value, in talking to our constituents who we have our ultimate responsibility to, is reflected by preserving the ecosystem we have left. We've got, definitely a need for housing. We can never let go of the fact that we're environmentalists and we value nature and we want to preserve the ecosystem we have that comports with equity. There have been at least several recent articles I've seen, I hope some of us have seen, showing that it is people of color who are disparately impacted by heat islands in urban areas. It's like the poorest areas and the people of color getting impacted where there's the greatest density. That's got to be a guidepost as we move through this. If we're going to look at increasing density in areas where it makes sense in a rational fashion, we got to do it with an equity lens to that. I believe that preserving the ecosystem also means limiting impervious surfaces. How can we do this to preserve the impact or to reduce the impact to the environment, footprints of buildings? Can we look at even stream impact fees, the impacts from impervious surfaces? I know that they put in that provision, you can't treat multifamily different than single family by the development regulations. That's wrong. And yet, does that mean then we have to disregard the actual impact that greater density buildings are going to have than single family? We can't disregard that in terms of environmental stewardship. So that's the values pretty much on the green space and the ecosystem I see. On the supporting infrastructure, I thought that was great because it speaks to that need to have walkability. What does that mean in Kenmore, in this post-World War II suburbia built on inequity and also carving up a bit of the environment at the same time? Well, they let the developers get away with not building a real city like Seattle, where they had denser development, smaller lots and smaller areas, but with sidewalks and alleys and corner stores. So we don't have that. We got cul-de-sacs. If we're going to increase density, we must look at a minimum sidewalks. And they've got to be sidewalks that I think are, well, I think there has to be a sidewalk impact fee from a development if you're going to increase the density of the lot. And it can't just be the frontage right in front of the place. It's got to be, look at the impact to the neighborhood, because you're having increasing vehicles capacity, unless we're really within the quarter mile. But I think you've got to have sidewalk impact fee. And then that walkability to transit again. It's also important to look at open space and the green space for gardens and potential for gardens for growing food. That's something that I think we've also got to preserve for the future. We may be in a very flush state of mind right now with a very good economy and everybody's okay. At least some people are not doing so well, but certainly we don't need to totally rely on growing our own fruits and vegetables, but maybe in some future moment, not too far away, it might become more critical. We might need space for gardens, as well as our natural ecosystem that, renews us all in so many ways. But, and the pontification here is almost over. Appreciate you listening. Yeah, you mentioned, hey, we're looking to planning out to 2044. We got to think about 2044. I must bring it up. We've got to take impact or account of the trends that are going to be coming up. And that's going to be that the baby boomers are going to be exiting. That's going to happen in 20 years because they're about 75 years old right now. That's 20 years older than me. I'm forced to know that because as a Gen Xer, I have been, our generation has been in the shadow of the boomers for some time. And the Surprising thing is, it's great. People are living longer. That's tremendous. It has impacts. I read in a Forbes magazine article that I believe last year, or the year before, what generation was it that outpaced millennials in purchasing houses? It was the baby boomers, still impacting the housing market. 20 years, 2044, they're not going to be living in single family houses anymore. They're going to have to be moving out, or they're going to be gone. They're going to be to nursing homes, et cetera. They're not going to be young forever. They can't be in the summer of love forever. So I think we got to look at those things. We got to look at real wages, other solutions as we're thinking about housing. And back to my original statement, we got to look for a balance and base it off what we've already decided here in Kenmore.
I think Councilmember Marshall wants to be a planner. Those are all things that we wrestle with. They're complex issues, and it's a balance. There is not one solution that will solve everything. It's going to be a balance. There's going to have to be some compromise. There's going to have to be some hard decisions. Looking to how Kenmore is now and where it wants to be, it's not going to be easy. And you're probably not going to make everybody happy when you make those decisions. But as a staff, that's what we're here for, is to come forward and give you options, give you the pros and cons, so that you can feel confident in the decision that you make is based on the facts presented to you. I know the city manager wants to make a comment about impact fees.
Yeah, just one clarification. We are already assess transportation impact fees on new development, and those transportation impact fees are calculated in the terms of what we call mobility units. And mobility can mean driving, walking, biking. And so transportation impact fees, as the code stands already, can pay for things like sidewalks, not just wider roads.
Councilor Rafael?
Thank you. I wholeheartedly appreciate Councilmember Marshall's statements tonight. And when thinking about how we continue to grow, we also are looking at code changes in other dynamic ways, right? So we've already kind of considered some corner business. What does that look like? And we haven't really talked about rooftop business, making use of our rooftop spaces, which are underutilized real estate in Kenmore with great views of the lake. It's a great opportunity to have restaurants, great opportunity for venue spaces, rooftop gardens, rooftop parks, green roofs, living buildings. If we can adapt our code to create greater viability and interest in Kenmore in this way, we can still maintain some fabulous charm of Kenmore, but also have amazing ways of serving our community instead of having it be a drive-through community. Because Kenmore is a jewel at the end of the lake. It's a calm amidst the storm around it. And people do like to stop and enjoy Kenmore, but we need more reason to bring them in and excitement to draw them in. And we're missing opportunities. I want to make sure that we have these opportunities and they're right in our grasp. We're seeing Bothell already work on that, and they don't necessarily have our gorgeous views, right? We have something Kenmore that's special and unique. Additionally, when we think about how we might adapt with environment, our infrastructure is improved as building is done. Builders help pay for some of those infrastructure improvements instead of it falling all on taxpayer backs. And that's some of the beauty of growth. I do understand there was new legislation about direct paths which somehow kind of intertwine with our gentle housing, housing types of all types, but direct pathways. And so I think we may have missed its notice, but I'm hearing more and more about it through Sound Cities Association and other partners, and how they're starting to adapt their approaches and thinking. So I want to make sure that as we grow, we're thinking thoughtfully with a growth mindset and innovation, and creating a pathway for vitality and propelling Kenmore upward.
Deputy Mayor.
First, thank you for the presentation and your work and outreach to our community. Each of you for that work. I am looking forward to seeing the report because it is hard for me to digest how many people you spoke with. One of the biggest concerns that our community had last year when we were looking at missing middle housing was that we didn't do enough outreach. One thing I realized, it was COVID and it was hard, but now we're here and it's time for us to make sure that we continue this outreach. And I'm not sure what it looks like for staff to do. I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to continue hiring consultants for this, but I think it's, I'm just stating this to ensure we have outreach to our community, regularly scheduled meetings or something along open houses, town halls, where our community knows that there's a reliable space to learn about this stuff. I think my biggest concern is we know that the state has passed laws that supersede whatever decision-making we may or may not have been on the path towards. We actually had taken a pause because we had listened to our community. We made us, I personally, and I think our council, the entire council said to our community, thank you for coming out, your voices matter. We also made it a commitment to continue outreach. There's going to need to be some education about some of these things that we know that they said no, that we're going to have no choice about. So I'm just saying this as a council, we need to continue this outreach and include our community as we have things that we're going to have to do that are hard, that are actually for our future. This is more for staff, that I want to see more mature missing middle style housing represented to our community so that we can see what it looks like with trees, what it looks like not with a brand new ADU, but as the housing comes in, what does a well-designed missing middle, these sorts of housing development look like, not when they're brand new, but as they mature, because we need trees. We need to be making sure that our regulations are including space for the environment and nature. I think we're all on board with that, but what does that look like so that we understand what we're looking at as a community as we build and develop? I'm excited about the transit stuff, but I think this conversation is more about the other types of housing. I want to get into the density, and I want to go into this other area that I see that I know our community is more on board for talking about right now. So, but where we're at, I'm thankful for the conversation. I really want to say it's so important for us as a council to ensure continued engagement with our community so that, and in a way that demonstrates our top priority of the environment, and that we are being leaders in the region for the environment and housing and development. That our goal is to ensure that we're able to house people at all income levels in our community, maintain a beautiful, walkable city. And that piece about a healthy environment. One that we had a person who made public comment about, the drainage into the wetland, or what her house provides with her riparian zone and the help that she's looking for. We need to ensure that our community knows that we are looking for ways to have design standards and things in our community that ensure that we are not taking away more than what we're putting in. Also, for council, the comment about seniors, just an out there thought, and I have to say it because it came up. What can we do potentially to create housing designs that, not everyone wants to be sent off to a corporate housing facility. I know we actually have a few very nice housing facilities that fit into some sorts of these intermediate size dwelling units that I think would be nice for us to ensure are in our neighborhoods so that our seniors don't have to move so far from home and maintain their sense of community if they're not able to live with their families or get support in other ways. But this is a really important conversation. I think the number one thing, two things. As Councilmember Marshall File, I think all of us are saying, environmental considerations, green space, number one. We really have to ensure that we are looking out for our environment as we're doing this density work. I know there's a path to it. I think we all can see there's a vision. We just have to challenge ourselves and heighten our thoughts to how we can get there. And I know we can. And this community engagement piece, it's not just a one-time conversation. It's not just a study. How are we as a city going to continue expanding that? I think, well, maybe some of our coffee with councils can be housing. I don't know. We'll find our path. But I just want to call attention to those being the areas that I think are so important. And thank you for the work that you've done for us in this quality presentation.
Any other questions, comments?
Mayor, if I think Michelle would like to give a comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, thank you for saying all of that. I think what you'll find in the summaries and reports when you read them is going to make you smile. I think the community engagement we conducted is so in line with what you're saying, but it's a little bit of a yes and, which will become clear when you read these reports. A lot of what folks were talking about when they're talking about green space isn't necessarily maintaining tree coverage. It is also about access to green space and the ability to live near parks and trails and other areas for recreation where families can go and enjoy them safely and easily. So it's not necessarily wanting trees lining streets, but in addition, access to be able to have those at the ready and to be living near in a community like this, which can provide them. Additionally, the continued engagement you were discussing about this isn't the end of the conversation. Absolutely. I was really grateful to structure our engagement in a way that made it clear we were continuing the conversation that had already been started. And through the different ways that we were reaching out to folks and the way that we structured our conversations, we're able to find a lot of new opinions, perhaps. I think what Councilmember Marshall was talking about, saying a lot of the engagement you were seeing that we conducted was in line with what you had considered. Again, I think it's a yes and. You'll hear a lot more positivity than what I had learned from in our engagement audit. And the last thing I'll say about continuing community conversation is one of our deliverables was actually providing an engagement analysis tool for equity, which Kiana here developed out of just sheer brilliance. I don't know how you took a blank page and turned it into that. We just finalized that and turned it in really a few days ago. So you definitely have not seen that yet, but it is a wonderful, fantastic tool that those of us, especially Debbie, who's familiar with this project, will be familiar with what it looks like and how to use it. And I highly encourage the city to use that as a tool moving forward to steward equitable engagement.
I want to thank you for, you just perked my eyes up a little bit. And I forgot to mention the quality work on the equity tool that you were sharing with us. Yeah, and you did peak. I think for our community, that park element is so important. We actually had a community member write in recently, or I met with them, and the idea of having neighborhoods centered around parks or I like the idea of plazas, how can we incorporate more of that and make it visual so our community members understand that those are opportunities and things we're seriously looking at. So thank you again.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember File?
Just for that last end point, you know, in many of the conversations I was hearing from our community, both that it's the seniors who are getting ready to downsize, and it's the young first-time home buyers or middle-aged home buyers who are trying to buy their first house in this, you know, high-cost market. And they are in the same market together. It's what is making accessing that first-time home so much more challenging for new families or younger individuals, and the same for our seniors downsizing. So it's really unfortunate. It shows the importance of this work that we have to do and the fruition which we really need to get started and moving on it. And I know that you have a lot of work to get through, but I hope we can at least start looking at some gentle rollout of our work so that we can bring our community with us. Because as our boomers are starting to, you know, expire or need greater needs, there are still not enough facilities in our current community. And I even learned that recently with my son. And that can be very challenging. So we see more families doing that dual home capacity or looking at ADUs, attached or detached. So I'm excited. I think this is a great time. This is a really important time in our history, and why 20 years ahead is considered kind of your 3 or 5 year plan in the term of city things. We have to have our mind back in 60 years from now and 100 years from now, because that's where the mark will be lasting. Thank you.
Anything further? Councilmember Kugler?
I don't want to take up too much time. I just really want to thank you for your work. I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of it. I know it wasn't easy doing the community engagement, but it was really important to our community and was a direct response to things that they asked us, which was more time, more listening, more engagement. So thank you for doing that. I'm also really looking forward to that equity framework that you provided for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight. I know that my colleagues have gotten used to a 9 p.m. break, but I believe we only have one more substantive piece here, and I would really hate to delay things if we don't have to. And we have one thing left, and it's short. So I would propose that we power through. If you need to get up, feel free to get up. But I don't want to take a 10-minute break for something that may be 10 minutes. Sure, we can take 5. 9:22.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be back at 9:22. Kenmore City Council will return to order. Next on the agenda, American Rescue Plan Act Business Nonprofit Assistance Update presented by ARPA Management Analyst Janet Quinn.
Thank you. It's nice to be here this evening. So I'm here to just bring you an update of where we are on the business assistance, the pandemic relief grants. And if I can get this to advance. There we go. So just to refresh your memories, we have $185,000 available from the 250 that you all allocated as the amount to put towards business assistance. This year, we've opened it up to commercial, home-based, and nonprofits, although the final rule, as I told you before, limits it to 501c3s and 501c19s. They had to have been operating prior to March 3rd, 2021, actually. That's the beginning of the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. And they have to be able to demonstrate pandemic-related impact. If you'll recall, we talked about, the last time I was here, we talked about the Washington State Constitution section that has a prohibition of gifting of public funds, and the American Rescue Plan allows us to have a very narrow opportunity for businesses to receive funding. It has to be pandemic related. So the outreach that we did, last time I was here, we had not talked to the DEIA committee yet, but we did that and they gave us some great input and suggestions on what to do, including offering in several languages. They observed that there are multiple businesses in our community that are not English speaking as their first language. And so we put together a flyer. We had the English and Spanish in the newsletter that was the print newsletter that came out, the spring quarterly. You probably all saw that. That's an image of what was in the quarterly there. And then next to it is a flyer that we created, and QR codes are fabulous. So we're trying to incorporate those as much as possible because they make them so easy, especially for people who use their phones as their method of accessing our website. So the one on the right is a flyer that we distributed to the businesses in the commercial zones in Kenmore, physically dropped those off. And they are in Chinese, Korean, Russian, Spanish, Thai, and Vietnamese, just with an introduction to the page and how to access the page. And then we, a couple of times, talked about this at the Kenmore Business Alliance meetings, Chamber, also the Bothell Kenmore Chamber distributed information about it. And as you can see, there are several places that it was mentioned in electronic format. We sent an email to past applicants and then, like I said, we hand delivered it to businesses within the commercial zones. We received 46 applications, but there were a few duplicates in there, so 42 unique applications. The graph shows all 46, but it included 7 nonprofits. The other category that you see right there is 2 S Corps and a nonprofit that is actually not eligible because it's not a 501c3 or a 501c19. The word cloud there just is, I just took all of the businesses, what they said they did, and input that in a spreadsheet and created a word cloud from it. Just interesting to see what the types of businesses and some of the words that they used for their businesses. So we are conducting interviews with all 42 of the applicants. And it's just an opportunity for us to build relationships, but most importantly, to hear their pandemic stories and hear how they were impacted by the pandemic and establish their eligibility and establish what their need is. And it's really fascinating to have them. So far, we've had 1 Spanish language interpretation request and 1 Vietnamese language request. So clearly there is a desire for people to be communicating with us in another language. So we are collecting all of the information. The evidence that we are asking for will be reviewed by our finance department team, and they'll be able to tell us yes or no whether there is pandemic related evidence. And then we'll make decisions after all of the interviews are finished. So I hope are going to be finished by June 26th with the interviews. I think we're about 10 in, and I have the rest to go. And it's been a great learning opportunity, a great opportunity to just meet business owners face to face and hear their stories. So. And that's all I have for you tonight, unless you have some questions.
Questions, Councilmember Baker?
Yes, on the grants to the nonprofits, would organizations like the Rowing Club, the Dragon Boaters and the Canoe and Kayakers, they're 501c3s, would they be eligible because they are providing things since the quarantine that have not been available for a couple, 3 years?
So they had to have applied by May 31st, which was the deadline for the application. And if they
Okay.
applied, and if they are a 501c3 and they were in existence prior to March 3rd, 2021, then absolutely we would consider their request.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions? Councilmember File?
I just wanted to say thank you and great work. This is exciting to see that those pandemic recovery dollars can actually be of great service to our community. And to have so much interest is fabulous. And I just wish we had more to give. So obviously it's needed, but I'm really grateful. So thank you for your work, and just so excited to see how this is going to impact our community.
Councilmember Kuklar?
I also want to thank you for this work and really appreciate the outreach that you're doing and the work and incorporating some of the feedback from the DEIA advisory group. I was just wondering, I couldn't recall, were there set amounts that these are being awarded in, or will it depend on the request?
You know, I think we're waiting till there is a maximum of 10,000 that was stated in the paperwork or in the application. We're waiting to see if you divide out, just do the math, it's somewhere $4,400 to $4,500. I think that's the easy way to go, and I don't know if that's the way that serves businesses best. So I think we'll just evaluate that at the end and see what picture emerges and what we hear from finance department, and make that decision at the end. But the need is different for different businesses. It's difficult to get a complete picture of what the need is. The numbers don't always tell the whole story, which is why the interviews have been really invaluable. So, so that's I don't know the answer to your question, other than yes, it could be a range, but it's not going to be more than 10,000 for any business, and most likely less.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much, Janet. We appreciate it.
And I just say thank you for offering this assistance to businesses. It's so meaningful. If you heard some of the comments in the interviews, you would know how much they appreciate you.
Well, thank you for the thoughtfulness you put into crafting this and making, our very back of the napkin idea into something that's meaningful.
My pleasure.
Staff report, Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, just three things. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 7:30 at the EERC, the Environmental Research Center, there's a pretty cool class called Rewilding. And our climate action plan manager is going to go to that, and I'm going to that, and you got to register in advance. So if you are interested, make sure you click on that link tonight if you can. Also, we're hitting a pretty big milestone on our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility strategic plan and 5-year roadmap. So it's gone out to city staff for their comments, and it's also gone to the DEIA Advisory Committee, and they're going to be discussing it this Thursday night. The goal is to have a draft for you to look at with incorporating all those comments at the June 26th City Council meeting, and then hopefully adoption sometime in July. So we're excited about that. It's taking the high level policy that you adopted last fall and converting it into real actionable on the ground things that we can do to make a difference and change the systems and institutions that have plagued our communities. So we're really excited about this, the work that my coworkers have been doing to put this together, along with Channing Kelly Ray and other stakeholders. So it's been great. And then last but not least, we're just super excited about how the farmers market got off to a good start on Wednesday. Thank you, Mayor, for giving the opening speech. And here's some pictures from that. But over 2,000 people came on Wednesday. So it's pretty good. And I understand that the hottest, that's not the right word. The best selling item were those popsicles. Was it over 500? I'm looking at my coworkers. 500 popsicles sold?
I think it was 420 from the report I saw.
Okay, something like that, yeah. So just lots of fun. I could have talked about that and where's the fun, but I decided to save it for last. So that's all I have.
All right, council member reports and comments. Councilmember Baker.
I have nothing to report.
Councilmember Marshall.
I am sorry this evening to let the public know that Richard Ramsey has passed away. He was the owner of Ostrom's Drugs for many, many years, and for many, many years on the North Shore School Board, North Shore School District School Board, and contributor to the North Shore School District and member of Kiwanis North Shore, and an all-around absolutely unforgettable gentleman character. And so I hope that everybody would join me in expressing condolences to his family. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kugler.
I think just a couple of comments. I think I might have been distracted while the city manager was giving updates, and was just wondering if we could get a quick update on the status of the land acknowledgement, because I think there is confusion among our community members about where that is.
Yeah, I just checked in with Channing Kelly Ray, our DEI consultant, on that just recently. I think it was last week. And she's working with the tribes for their input and buy-off. And that's where we're at right now. She's waiting for a response from them. And she continues to politely check in with them. So I would love it if we can have something for you to review in July. I think that's what I'm hoping for.
Great, thank you. Just one quick update from the Eastside Transportation Committee, which I know Councilmember Baker and also our mayor also attend, but this most recent meeting, they did talk about the consolidation of King County Metroflex, which is actually a consolidation of like Community Ride, Pingo, and Via. It was a bunch of different services that does service the southern portion of Kenmore. Thankfully, our mayor did ask if that would be expanded to the north part of Kenmore, and they said they're not looking to expand that service at this time, but they are looking to grow ridership. So they currently are seeing like, I think over 6,000 daily rides through that service. So hopefully we'll see that continue to thrive and grow, and hopefully maybe offer more service in the future. And then for anyone interested, they also gave an overview of Revive I-5, which is a like dozens of preservation projects that are planned for I-5. So if anyone is interested, check out that. Just do, a search for Revive I-5 and you'll find maps and details and timelines, et cetera, on there. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Nothing to add tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am kind of excited to share that there's been an update from the Sound Cities Association briefing with public health. And one of the things that they talked about at that meeting was how summer is both a fun and exciting time for folks. It's also a time where people can feel often alone and isolated, and depression and suicidal ideation tends to be more significant. So brought to mind the work we're doing on providing resources both to our schools and our community. And I'm looking forward to an update on how that's going to come along. I know the RFP went out and Center for Human Services is going to be the agent with the schools, but I don't know how that's going to pan out. And then today I had a lovely tour of Kenmore Elementary in preparation of the community serve day. And that's such an exciting time each year. This year it's going to be August 27th from 9 to, I guess, 11 a.m. or 1, depending on your location. And the sign up form is available at communityserveday.org. And I do need a co-leader this year. So if anyone wants to volunteer themselves, it's just one day, part of a day. And this year is a bit less work, which is kind of exciting given all those wood chips from last year. So
I'm still sore from that.
I bet it's really in helping, because there's going to be so much change and growth with Kenmore Elementary specific. At that site, it's going to be playground chips, some beautification, helping teachers with their classrooms, preparing for students, all for a healthy, safe return back to school. And so people can sign up online for any location that best serves them. And I'm hoping to see a hand pop up for a co-leader, and we can talk later about that. You can reach out. That's it. Thanks.
I think if you're sending an email out, we might be able to check our calendars.
All right, great, thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler already covered most of what went on to the ETP, which was great. And yeah, the opening of the farmer's market always makes me very happy because now I'm gonna have cherries all summer and it's beautiful. And I was very excited. I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to throw rhubarb as a way to open up the farmer's market again. That was weird and fun. But it was a great opening and people were really excited. And it's always fun to see happy people walking around spending their money in Kenmore. So
I think it's my fault that we didn't bring back the
I mean, it's
rhubarb because
probably for the best.
yeah, I
I was worried I was going to hit somebody last year.
I almost hit somebody last year and I think that's why they didn't bring it back.
That's fair enough.
It curved.
Yeah. No more business to come before us. The Kenmore City Council is adjourned.